world is good. We don't really know where the world is gonna go, but now everybody knows that you can't stop for too long. Got to keep. But now everybody knows. Got to keep.
You don't have to be retired to receive tax-free income. The problem is the vehicles that we've been conditioned to believe to help get us there were never designed to produce income.
Got to keep going. What you want to be going, you will see.
Oh, yes.
It's your destiny, be in harmony. We were never meant to be apart. What you want to be going, you will see. You can have everything you want. It's your destiny, be in harmony.
If you had a machine in your garage and all you had to do was put a quarter in it and it printed out $100, put a quarter in it, print it out $100, would you ever stop that machine from running?
But now everybody knows.
So what if you use that job that you hate as leverage to fill your machine so they can create income for you, so you don't have to worry about income?
We know where the world is gonna go. But now everybody knows that you can't stop for too long. Got to keep going.
Good evening. Welcome back. Tonight we're going to talk about, it's like part 3 of the Velocity Banking series that we've been covering. So we talked about, oh, this shirt is loud, right? Okay, first we talked about what Velocity Banking is, kind of like the Beginner's Guide 101. Before you get started, here's what you need to know. Then we talked about what are the steps? How do you do this month to month? And what are the specific steps and how to understand how to apply this to your situation, right? So now we're going to talk about some of the more advanced parts of Velocity Banking, some of the problems that people find inside of Velocity Banking. Like, it's not so cut and dry for me. I have an issue, an obstacle that I have to overcome. What do I do? Well, the number one obstacle when people are trying to start Velocity Banking is having adequate cash flow, because we've already talked about cash flow is the most powerful component of Velocity Banking. It's where all your leverage is. It's where it's what propels and creates the velocity in Velocity Banking, right? So what happens if you don't have enough money? What happens if your cash flow is low or you have negative cash flow? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. So if that's you, if you have an adequate income, if you're spending more than you're earning, if maybe perhaps you're just looking at your finances and you're not really, you're not doing the math all of the way to understand exactly where you are in terms of your cash flow, and in which case you might not understand where your leverage is. If that's you, if you fall into any of those categories, or you're just trying to improve your cash flow, this is the one for you. So before we get into that, there's kind of something that's been on our minds. I'm not going to get completely into it in this stream, but it's important to put up front. And we didn't really talk about this, but I want to just put this up front. Before we talk about negative cash flow or the particular obstacles inside of Velocity Banking or any strategy like this, because just because we talk about Velocity Banking doesn't mean that it's the end all be all, right? We talk about there are many ways to 10, right? We talk about there's solutions out there for everyone, and everybody's situation is different too. However, the one thing that we see a lot of people do is focus on becoming debt-free. This is probably the biggest obstacle, is your mindset towards your finances. That's the biggest one. So it's not a spoiler alert, because that's not what tonight's about. But I want you to think about it while we're going through this example of how some of this information might make you feel, or if there's content that you're seeing out there across the interwebs around debt elimination, personal finance, getting yourself into a different situation that makes you feel more comfortable, and what makes you feel uncomfortable, and maybe trying to take inventory of that, because a lot of the examples that we go over, some of the stuff that ends up being uncovered in the calls or through this process in just learning different strategies is how they're thinking and how they're approaching their finances for the long term. So we're going to revisit this in the end, but I wanted to throw that out in the beginning so that we can just start like a plant a seed. How does this information, if you were to now watch this with that in mind, how does that change some of this? Okay. So that, just going to throw that out there.
No, I love it because, we talk on this channel, we focus heavily on, hey, what are those right vehicles we should be focused on to be able to accomplish our true goal? And we give away the knowledge so that you can pair the right vehicle with the right knowledge. But there's this three-headed monster here that we can provide you the right knowledge and the right vehicle all day long. But if you don't have the right you, we can't bring the right you to the party. You have to. So it's identifying what are those things that are holding me back? What are those things I've been conditioned to believe, only to learn that that's not necessarily true or the right process? Or, you know what? I've been lied to this whole time. So you have to kind of deal with all of those emotions. And when you add a spouse into that, you might be on this journey where, hey, I'm picking up the right knowledge and the right vehicle, and I'm focused on the right me. So I'm headed down this path. But you've got a spouse who may be stuck in those same, I'll call it traditional mode of thinking or approaching ways to eliminate debt or generate wealth that may be impacting things as well. So no, you're spot on with that, because it's, even though this live is about velocity banking and how to approach it and what actions to take, it is not and has not ever been about debt elimination. I'm a retirement consultant. My job is to help you generate income. It's about generating wealth. It's about generating income. Velocity banking just happens to be a bridge to help get you there, because it's very difficult to be able to generate wealth or focus on your legacy or what things are going to look like when you're no longer working if the cash flow isn't there to be able to accomplish it. So, no, I think you're spot on. And the topic that we're covering today, I'd say one of the most consistent comments over this last probably week maybe has been, but what if I don't have the right amount of cash flow? What if I am negative in cash flow? What actions can I take if I can't qualify for a personal line of credit or a home equity line of credit? So I think today is going to address a lot of those questions.
Yeah, well, shout out to everyone who was here early, the early crowd. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you have questions, put a Q in front of it, and we'll be sure to bring that up during the Q&A section of this stream. And if you have comments in the meantime, please share them. We love to hear what's on your mind. And so if something hits for you, put it in the chat. If something is questionable for you and you're like, nope, I don't understand that, even if it's not a full question and it's just something that's like, not really feeling that, or that doesn't make sense to me, or okay, aha, that was an aha moment for me. We love to go back and see what the experience was like. And of course, we don't know unless you share it with us. So we are extra grateful for those who are super chatty in there, and also who are welcoming in our new members. We have a lot of new members all the time. And this is a place where like-minded people get to finally have an opportunity to be in one space. As you said, there's a lot of people who are not surrounded by others who want to move forward with them in velocity banking or learning new strategies, learning new things in general, right? Yep. So this is your opportunity to meet people who are on your same journey and who are learning just the same as you. So when you talk about increasing your cash flow, this is the community that's going to get excited about that with you, right? Even if your friends and family won't. We know what that's like, and we know the importance of community when you are, taking a leap out into unknown, uncharted territory, even if it's just uncharted for you and your legacy. Okay, so I'll stop chatting now. Let's dive in. Velocity banking, what to do if you have negative cash flow, and how. What are your options? So that's really what we're going to talk about. You ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go.
All right. So again, we've been covering this velocity banking topic for the last few weeks, just kind of digging into peeling back the layers on defining and understanding at the core what is it about. But today we are focused on, like, how am I supposed to do this if I have negative cash flow? In this particular example, it's interesting. It started out headed down one path, but it took a sharp turn, and I'll kind of dig into those details. But the bottom line is, how do we address negative cash flow? Well, It all first starts with, where do you begin? And as we talk a lot on this channel, it starts out with what is the goal? Like, what's the point? And a lot of times that conversation starts with, hey, I've got this student loan debt. I've got this car that I want to pay off. Hey, I saw that you guys were able to eliminate your mortgage pretty quickly. I want to focus on eliminating my mortgage. When in truth, 9 times out of 10, that's I'll call it a symptom. That's a short-term goal. The objective, the true objective, is actually something larger than that. So then you jump into our self-directed.info/live, go grab the worksheet and start filling out that worksheet. And one of the things I also want to address today is also within the sheet. I think the last two lives we pulled up the sheet and kind of stepped through what it looks like when you start inputting the proper variables inside the sheet. I'm not going to pull up the sheet today, but I am going to reference the sheet on some of the, I'll call it, challenges that I've noticed when I've been meeting with people. And then once you understand your numbers by grabbing that sheet at self-directed.info, then you take action. And so what does it look like? Well, in most cases, when people are talking about eliminate and or reducing debt, it looks a lot like this. Income comes in, goes into your checking account, and from your checking account, you're paying bills. And what's left over ends up sitting in that checking account, that being your cash flow. And my stance on that is, if you have cash flow sitting in your checking account, and if you don't have a place to put it, or you're not taking action with that cash flow to help generate more, 9 times out of 10, it ends up either moving as extra on bills or wasted away on just traditional expenses throughout your living experience. And so what we wanted to address today, though, is what happens, or what am I supposed to do, or what should I do if I have negative cash flow? So if the objective is to increase my cash flow, and if I'm starting from a place of not having enough, what should I do? And I think I surprise a lot of people when I run into calls where individuals have negative cash flow, because sometimes I go, well, maybe velocity banking isn't for you. Maybe velocity banking isn't the first step, because to me, in order to adequately increase or generate more cash flow, you have to have some. Because if you are leveraging some of those if you're leveraging some of those velocity banking tools, like a home equity line of credit or a personal line of credit, if you have negative cash flow, all you're going to do is make that process worse. So what are some of those actions that you can take to be able to put yourself in a more positive cash flow position so that you can take advantage of some of those debt tools? Well, I usually start here. Are there some actions that you're currently taking within your economic profile that you can simply turn off? My favorite one is the gym membership. If your goal is to get yourself in a more positive cash flow position, can you simply turn off that membership so that you can, at least, so that dollar amount isn't going out as an expense? Also, in addition, the simple way is increase more income, meaning if you've got a side hustle, apply that side hustle to reducing the amount of negative cash flow that you have. And I know that's easy to say. Increasing your income is very easy to say, but to me, it's one that over the years, when I've met with people as it relates to velocity banking, this is a action that gets overlooked, meaning the opportunity to increase your cash flow using leverage. And leverage is something that we talk about a lot on this channel. Using leverage this could be a self-directed 401k, or maybe leveraging or borrowing a certain dollar amount from your current employer's plan, or even a consolidation loan, or there's opportunities to grab leverage wherever you can grab leverage from, apply that to this situation, and help you get out of or put yourself in a more positive cash flow position. This one is something that we talk about, but I've never really spent, I'll call it, a whole lot of time in digging into the details of getting multiple uses out of the same dollar. I think other channels call this something different, and I'm going to highlight this a little bit later as well. But one of the actions that you can absolutely take is getting multiple uses out of the same dollar. And then I kind of talked about that in this leverage bucket in using a loan, but a lot of times it's taking those approaches to consolidate what it is you're spending. So what do I mean? can you combine items together that maybe you were paying out of separate credit cards, combine them together so that you only have one, which means you only have one monthly payment. Yeah, the payment might be a little bit higher, but it's less than the combined amount. So is there an opportunity to consolidate and or combine some of those expenses? And then there's items that I don't talk about much, but again, when we meet, I do bring them up, and that is maybe debt snowball or debt avalanche is a better option for you if these can't necessarily apply. And one of the things that we use when we were doing velocity banking is I spent a fair amount of time talking to creditors because I was looking for any opportunity I could around increasing cash flow. So there may be an opportunity to call an AT&T or CenturyLink or whoever your internet provider is or your cable provider is and renegotiating or negotiating some of the expense that you currently have. I'm a huge fan of calling saying, hey, are you guys offering any bonuses or any cash back opportunities to reduce some of that expense going out? And again, there may be a lot more that I'm not even thinking about, but this was kind of high level. Usually when I'm on a call, I focus here. And today, what we wanted to do was kind of combine a few of these. So I'm going to focus on turning some things off and getting multiple uses out excuse me, uses out of the same dollar. And I think that's in corporation with also consolidating some expenses. So that's kind of where we're going to focus today. Excuse me. So in today's example, we're going to highlight a young lady by the name of Bailey, 44 years of age. And there's a lot going on this slide. I'll dig into the details, but bottom line is she's 44 years of age. She's got a decent income, about $5,800 a month coming in. And after filling out the sheet, let's see, I'll use that. After filling out the sheet, she identified the fact that, whoa, after putting my expenses, my assets and my debts inside the sheet, she identified herself as having about $1,600 in negative cash flow. And when she had originally reached out, she felt as though she had negative cash flow, but she didn't think it was something this large. And I said, well, what do you think you have in negative cash flow? She said, maybe a couple $100, definitely not 1680. So what that told me was there may be an opportunity within the sheet that, because what I usually find is people tend to, I'll call it duplicate expenses, thinking they're accounting for everything in a successful manner. But in essence, what's happening is they're actually double counting some things. So here's what I identified. Notice in the asset column, what she has, I'll make this a little bit bigger. What she has in the asset column is mortgage and some life insurance. Well, notice right here, State Farm, $363. There's also a State Farm insurance of $363. So there are two items here, and I understand why she was calling it an asset. We talk about cash value life insurance policies being an asset to you. So I understand why she was calling this an asset, but what's happening is she's double counting them. So she may be negative cash flow, but the first thing we identified was there's an opportunity here to be able to either stop counting here and count it here, or stop counting it here and here. And then from my perspective, after digging into some of the details as it relates to her life insurance-based products, both of those are term policies, so she's not really generating any cash value. So these are actually expenses. So my point is, when you are filling out these details in your velocity banking worksheet, be conscious of whether or not you're running into a situation or creating a situation where you might be double counting some items. So if we can reduce or eliminate this item. And then the other thing that jumped out to me was this mortgage of 1098, calling it an asset, but over here in the debts column, there's also a mortgage of 1098. So the thought process was, here's another opportunity where it looks like we might be double counting things. So again, even though your mortgage or your home is an asset, it is absolutely a debt that you owe. So I can understand why it's happening. My point is, when we add all of these items together, we could be putting ourselves in a situation where we might be double counting things. So again, getting rid of, getting rid of the mortgage amount that's sitting here and leaving it in the assets column. So that should help or at least assist in what this negative amount actually is. And as I was going through this list, there was something else that jumped out at me as well. And as I mentioned, one of the first things I look at is there something within your traditional expenses that you can just simply turn off? And as I was kind of going down the list, one thing that jumped out at me was this item. This item says credit monitoring. So is there so credit monitoring for $35 a month? While it's not a lot, again, when you're dealing with a situation where, hey, I'm trying to increase my cash flow so I can put myself in a position so that I can actually start hitting my goals, it's an opportunity for you to be able to eliminate those things that really aren't serving you. And so what I just kind of highlighted was, is there an opportunity to turn off or stop the credit monitoring? Because again, in velocity banking, here's what we know. We know that the more that we start to address debt, your credit score is going to increase and or decrease depending on the actions that you're taking. So there's going to be a lot of fluctuation happening right now. So is this something that you even need at the moment? But the bottom line is, we talked about turning off or stopping the credit monitoring, at least for a short period of time. And I think that's the only other thing I'll highlight on this sheet is we hadn't also identified a debt tool. And as you go down the list of debts, there are a few things that jump out. One, she has a figure HELOC, which I had immediately identified as being, if you're looking for a debt tool, again, a home equity line of credit, a product that you can get money into and get money out of to be able to address your bills, that home equity line of credit seems like the ideal opportunity. But here's what we learned, again, after asking more questions. What type of home equity line of credit is it? How is it able to be used? Does it have a banking and routing number? Can you get income into and out of it? Meaning, is it open-ended or is it closed? What we learned is this is really no different than a big credit card. I kind of liken it to, I don't know if you guys have been seeing commercials around Avon. Avon talks about how you can access your equity in your home immediately with very few documentation and gives you, large sums. But in truth, it's just a big credit card. That's all it is. Yes, it's leveraging your home equity line, your equity in your home, but in truth, it's just a big credit card. So in this case, this was not an opportunity to be able to use for a debt tool. What we ended up identifying was this Navy Federal, this $242 payment that she's currently making into Navy Federal. It's a Navy Federal credit card that she can use as a debt tool. And we'll dig into how, but my point is, here's why. Her Navy Federal credit card is linked to her checking account, which means she has a Navy Federal checking account, and linked to it is her Navy Federal credit card, which allows her to use her Navy Federal credit card as overdraft protection. I'll dig into more of these details, but my point is, out of her initial filling out of the workbook on selfdirected.live, again, you can go there to grab your own. After kind of just identifying where some of the opportunities are, we were also able to identify where the debt tool was going to come from as well. So from here, we wanted to talk through velocity banking. And again, this is the traditional approach. Income comes in, goes into your checking account, and we've identified a debt tool. This debt tool is going to be a credit card, so it's still a line of credit. And as income comes into that line of credit, we're going to pay bills from that line of credit. And then what ends up happening is this cash flow ends up living on the line of credit, which we end up recycling. That's the traditional approach as it relates to velocity banking. But here's the problem. In her case, we're using a credit card. Most credit cards, there's some bills, I'll say, that you can't pay by credit card. So how do you get beyond the fact that I can't pay my mortgage, I can't pay my car note, I can't pay some life insurance-based products or some expenses through a credit card? What do we do? So the approach that we are going to take is going to look a little bit different. It's going to look a little bit like this. Meaning, income is still going to come in, but when the income comes in, and that income is $5,800, I believe. When that income comes in, that income is immediately going to be transferred onto this credit card. And when that happens, that now means the checking account is going to be left at zero. So again, Income comes into the checking account. Everything from the checking account is now going on to that credit card. And now that means the checking account is either zero or very close to zero. Well, she's then going to pay her bills normally from this checking account. It's the normal process, the normal ACH routing number that she's been using. But when that happens, it's going to create a negative. Oh, I guess I'll do it the other way. A negative um, a negative, I'll call it an overdraft. It's going to create an overdraft in her checking account if there's no money in the checking account. And she then starts to pay bills from that same checking account. What's going to happen is it's going to create an overdraft. And when the checking account overdraft, because the credit card is linked to that checking account, that overdraft is then going to be pulled from the credit card itself, which means once that negative dollar amount is pulled from that credit card, what's left over is the cash flow that is then sitting on the debt tool. So this is, again, what we're doing is we're breaking this system right here. Income is coming into the checking account, going on to the debt tool. We're leaving the checking account at zero and then paying bills, causing an overdraft situation in her checking account, but still being able to satisfy all of the payments. Why? Because the checking account has a credit card connected to it for overdraft protection. So this is how she's able to make a mortgage payment from the same checking account and it be drafted from the credit card. So this is how she's able to use a credit card as a debt tool. So what does that look like? So compared to what we were originally showing, again, we started out with negative cash flow of about 1680. So we made some adjustments. A few of those adjustments look like, hey, we moved that State Farm and that USAA out of the two life insurance items out of the assets sheet and kept them in the expense sheet. So here they are right here being addressed, USAA and State Farm. So these two items. And in addition, we stopped the credit monitoring. And in addition, we identified the debt tool. So that Navy Federal, that was a $242 payment, when I make it my debt tool, that means all of my income is going on to that debt tool, which means it satisfies that $242 payment initially. And so what ends up happening is the total amount that I owe from an asset, expense, and a debt perspective, my cash flow is my cash flow is still negative, but it's not 1680. It's $55. So we're getting close. So these actions, we turned off something and we just made some adjustments to the sheet to make sure that everything was in its right place. But in the process, we were able to, and we identified a debt tool and started driving our income through that debt tool. So just in the process of taking those few actions, we were able to get close, but we still have negative cash flow. And so the approach that we're going to kind of step into now, it goes back to those list of items that we had talked about. What we wanted to do was address that negative cash flow by getting multiple uses out of the same dollar. So what does this even mean? If you watch other, I'll call it social media people talking about velocity banking, I think this is called something different by everyone. And I'll share with you what I mean. I think in some cases I've heard it called expense. I think parking is what it's called. I've heard it called sleeping and expense. I've heard it called matching and expense. But from my perspective, what I'm talking about doing is putting your money in a position to where, since it's a bill that you are already going to pay anyway, and because you were already going to pay that bill, why not pay that bill from a vehicle that will allow you to not only satisfy the payment, but also make the payment on that expense as well? So what do I mean? So coming back over here, I just want to kind of highlight a couple things. So one, I've got this, scroll up a little bit. I've got this State Farm expense of $363. I'm going to pay this expense regardless, meaning it's my life insurance. So it's always going to be there. And in addition, I've got this USAA expense of $163. Well, if you notice these credit cards over here, I've got an Amazon Prime plus Visa that I'm paying $40 a month on, and I've got an Amex Blue that I'm paying $100 a month on. Both of these expenses, the State Farm and this USAA, both of these expenses are capable of being paid by credit card. So, what if this $363 expense was paid by this Amex Blue that has a minimum payment of $100? What am I saying? I'm saying this. I'm going to, from this point forward, pay this $363 expense from this credit card that the original initial minimum payment was $100. What happens when I do that? Well, since I'm going to pay this anyway, when I end up paying this 363 insurance bill from this credit card, the balance is going to go up $363 or 364 for rounding, but 363 bucks. Well, I have to make that $363 payment. When my income pays this $363 payment, where am I going to pay it to? I'm going to pay it to this Amex Blue. So when I pay my normal $363 payment that I'm normally going to pay on this insurance, I'm satisfying the payment due on this Amex Blue. So in essence, what's not happening? I am not paying this $100. I'm taking this $363 insurance payment, paying this Amex Blue with it, and therefore I'm satisfying this $100 payment, which means it is no longer due.
We have a question, and
Go
I think it's worth bringing up right now.
Go for it.
Veronica says, if we match those expenses to the card, do we change it on the worksheet? So how do you reflect that in your own personal ledgers?
And I will get there, because right now what I'm just doing is identifying which ones we're going to do that with. So we're going to do that with this State Farm, and we're going to do that with this USAA. So I will answer that question, but I'd say give me about 30, 40 seconds to get there.
Okay.
So we're going to take this 363, place it here. We're going to take this USAA of 163 up, place it here. So let me kind of write that a little bit just so that you can see it again. So we're going to take this item and we're going to pay it using the Amex, and we're going to take this item and we're going to pay it with the Amazon. So these are the two ways we're going to address this debt. And when we do that, what happens? So let's drill in a little bit to look at this a little bit cleaner. So let's start with the items that we are matching or parking or getting multiple uses out of the same dollar. You can call it whatever you like. The action is still the same. So it was an expense. Let's go here. It was an expense on State Farm that was $363, right? Because I'm now paying it using this credit card, I moved that payment from the expense column into the debts column. So what you notice is there's no longer a $100 payment here. It is now $363. And this USAA life insurance was was $163, and now I moved that $163 payment from USAA onto the Amazon Prime. And so therefore, this payment is no longer $40; it's now $164. So what did that do to these three columns? Well, it dropped the amount due from whatever it was down to $1,492. And this column actually increased a little bit. But when because there's many things happening on this sheet. So I'll just keep it at the matching of expenses or getting multiple uses out of the same dollar. So hopefully this answers your question. What did I end up doing? I ended up removing it from the expense sheet and adding it to the debts sheet as an additional payment that I'm making. One other thing to note, just because I added $363 a month to this card, it will actually start to reduce the balance for the most part. But in truth, what's happening between these two cards? All I'm doing is parking an expense. All I'm doing is sitting an expense on those cards, and the balance isn't really changing over time, meaning it drops when I make that payment. But when it drops when I take the expense that was sitting, that I was paying outright to the life insurance company. When I take that dollar amount and put it on the debt tool, it reduces it then, but I still have to pay the monthly balance that is on the card. So what ends up happening is it just sits there and does this. The balance doesn't really move, but it also doesn't get any worse. So what I am doing is in order to increase my cash flow, what I'm doing is I'm parking these expenses on this card temporarily. This is not something that you can do for, I'll call it, for a sustained period of time, because what's going to end up happening is your interest is going to catch up with you. As of right now, the monthly payment, this 363, is so much larger than the original monthly premium. I'm okay for a bit, but the bottom line is I'm really not making much movement on these two cards. I'm actually going to address those two cards second time around, so we'll get into that. But what else is happening on this sheet? Well, in addition, as I mentioned, I've addressed the mortgage piece, meaning I'm no longer double counting the mortgage. So in essence, my cash flow, because I got multiple uses out of this same dollar by taking this expense and using the credit cards that I was already going to be making a payment on anyway to take care of these expenses, my cash flow is now increased. I went from having negative $55 in cash flow to increasing to $772. There was one other action that I had taken to help me achieve that $772, and that was identifying this debt tool. So let's kind of deep dive the debt tool a little bit. This debt tool is a credit card that had an initial balance of $10,093. This is a Navy Federal credit card with a limit of $30,000, but it already has a current balance. So it's a credit card that isn't I'll call it fresh out the box. I don't have some 0% for 18 months. This is a credit card that was already being used, that already had a minimum payment of $242 a month. I'm now converting that credit card into a debt tool. How is that even possible? It's because I'm able to link this credit card to this checking account as overdraft protection. It makes it a pretty clean process. So again, as my income comes in, it goes on to the debt tool. I leave my checking account at zero. And so what happens is the balance on that credit card immediately drops when I put my income on it. And then it leaves me a remaining balance of about $4,200 plus interest. But then I'm going to take this Discover card and this Amex Platinum card, and I'm going to pay them off. I'm going to do a balance transfer. I'm going to take one of those convenience checks, and I'm going to write whatever the balance is on this Discover card and whatever the balance is on this Amex Platinum card, and I'm going to pay them off using this Navy Federal credit card. So when I do that, this balance is going to jump up. Even though I put my income in, the balance on this credit card is still going to jump up because I'm going to now pay off these two credit cards. And when I do that, so when I combine all of these actions, I fixed the problems in the sheet that were being double counted. I stopped the credit monitoring. I got multiple uses out of the same dollar by taking a normal expense and paying for it by credit card. And then I identified a credit card as my debt tool, and I bundled or consolidated a couple of credit cards into one and dumped them all into this credit card. So when I did all of that, the ending balance on this credit card ends up being somewhere around $16,000. Now, I am not accounting for the actual amount of interest, so this number is actually higher than 1586 because it's 1586 plus interest. But what does that look like? So let's deep dive again this debt tool. What is actually happening inside of the debt tool? Again, the limit on this debt tool, the limit on this Navy Federal credit card, it's not a home equity line of credit, it's not special. The limit on this Navy Federal credit card is $30,000. Again, when I take all of those actions that I just showed you and add the interest, the ending balance ends up being, the starting balance of this process is about $10,093. The interest rate on this credit card is 16.24%. So in month zero, it's 1093 sitting on the balance. That cash flow that I referenced when I put all of my cash flow in, pay all of my bills from, the cash flow of 772 ends up sitting on this line of credit. But I do have to pay interest. I can do it for you if you would like, but if you were to simply multiply $10,093 times 0.6124, you'll get a number. You divide that number by 12, you end up with about $136 and some change. Rounded up to about $137 in interest is what you're already paying for that month. So again, your income goes in, you pay bills from it, your cash flow ends up sitting on the debt tool. You got there's a certain amount of interest that you're going to accumulate, and those 2 credit cards that I paid off are also going to be added to this dollar amount, which means at the end of month 1, I'm left with a balance of about $20,762 on a credit card with a limit of $30,000. That's just month 1. So now what do? We do velocity banking. We rinse and repeat. So what does that look like? If I was to share my screen with the sheet, it would look a lot like this. That Navy Federal credit card has a limit of $30,000. We have a starting balance of $10,000. When I put all of my income onto that line of credit, it drops the balance down. But then I got to pay bills, and I'm going to pay off that Discover and that Amex card. And when I do that, all I'm going to do is allow that cash flow, this cash flow here, to continue. I'm going to continue putting my income onto the debt tool, paying bills from it, and that cash flow ends up working itself down to, it takes me about somewhere around 11 months before I end up paying down the balance of the 2 credit cards that I put on. I got paid down once I get to about $10,000. I'm using 10,000 as I'll call it my my point where I will make other chunks. So in this case, it takes me about 11 months till I get to around $10,000, and then I'm going to address the next 2 credit cards, the Amex Blue and the Amazon. And when I do that, my balance goes back up. When my balance goes back up again, I use velocity banking to pay it down again. Once I get to around that $10,000 amount mark, I'm then going to chunk away at another debt. Well, in this case, I'm going to chunk away at the Goldman Sachs and the USAA Amex. And then it's going to take me another 18 months or so. So it takes me about 20 months to get rid of these 6 credit cards. Again, about 19, 20 months to be able to do so. But when I do that, I still have a balance on the debt tool that I have to pay down. And it takes me another about, I'll call it 10 months on top of that to pay this debt tool back down to 0. So what does it look like once I've paid off? Is this the one? Nope. So what does it look like at the end of the 20 months? So let's look at the 20-month mark. So again, by the 20-month mark, and let's go back here. What I am referencing is this point in time. This is the point where I have paid off all of these cards and I've added my last balance to my debt tool. So I'm talking about this point right here. What does it look like at month 20? Well, at month 20, I have a balance of about 18 to 742. My cash flow at this point has jumped up from 772 up to about 1630. How has my cash flow jumped up from 772 to 1630? Well, it's because prior to this point, I paid off 4 of the cards. And every time I paid off a card, my cash flow steadily increased. So at this point, I've got about 1,600 in cash flow. I am still accounting for the interest. How do I calculate the interest? Again, it's this number times this number divided by 12. It's pretty simple. And those last 2 cards that I paid off, I'm going to make another chunk of about 9734. And when I do that, the ending balance ends up being about 18,742 at the start of month 20. And then it's going to take me another 10 months to pay it off to 0. So in essence, what has happened is over a 30-month period. Again, 20 months of those 6 credit cards in general, these last 10 months is just paying off the debt tool. So over a 30-month period, I would have addressed almost $45,000 in debt and picked up from a negative 55, I won't even count the 1680, from a negative 55 cash flow to a positive 1630 cash flow. And again, still accounting for, I get it. There's a debt tool that I still owe interest on. So there may be $100 less, but who cares? I still got about 1630 in cash flow by the end of that 30-month period. And here's the truth about that. This 1630 started here. So it's from month 20 on, I have $1,630 in cash flow. I'm using that 1630 to pay down this debt tool. So I don't increase in cash flow when I pay off the debt tool. It's just I have no balance. But because I'm running my income in and paying my expenses from, this 1630 in cash flow is what stayed with me from month 20 in perpetuity. So, my next question is, now what? We spent these 30 months to pay down, or maybe 20 months to pay off this $23,000 in debt. What do we do now? What do we do with this cash flow? What actions can we take with this cash flow to be able to put us in a better, I'll call it, wealth generating position? Because again, when we peel back the layers, what's the true goal? The true goal isn't just eliminating this debt. There's a purpose for eliminating this debt. Hopefully that purpose is I want to get my money working for me. But it was difficult to do so when we were sitting in a negative cash flow position. So now that we're no longer there, what's that next action we take? And from there, at least with Bailey, what we ended up doing was jumping into a secure compound interest account, taking a portion of this cash flow as well as the room on this debt tool, leveraging some of the room on the debt tool plus the cash flow. I think she ended up doing $20,000 lump sum plus $10,000 a year into a secure compound interest account to put herself in a position to where, maybe she could retire early, or if nothing else, supplement her current income. So before I kind of jump into the calculator, sweetheart, any questions about any of that?
Yep. We have some really good questions. Marie says, can I still be able to use that credit card for purchase?
Yep. So if we're talking about the credit card that you're using for your debt tool, that credit card is where your cash flow is sitting. So that credit card is your emergency fund. That credit card is for any other incidentals that you're wanting to do. Now, what's the impact of you leveraging the cash flow that's sitting on that card? The impact is maybe instead of 20 months, it becomes 22 months or 21 months or something like that. So it will impact your ability to pay off the debt faster, but that's what it's designed for. Because think of it this way, where was that cash flow originally sitting? It used to sit in your checking account, or maybe you might have moved it from your checking account to your savings account. So it's still the same cash flow, still accessible, and yes, still available for you to be able to use if you need to.
And I just want to recap Veronica's question because I felt like it's worth it. She's saying if we match those expenses to the card, right? So now that you're sleeping, as you said, some people call it
sleeping expenses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Parking expenses, like that. Different.
Yeah.
Ways.
How are you supposed to log that on the worksheet or in your own personal ledger?
Yep. So now this situation, I think, is specific, meaning we're using the velocity banking worksheet that we offer on our site. You may be using other tools that may have other I'll call it variables at play. But the moral of the story is if you're moving an expense to a debt like a credit card, then yes, you want to account for that in your sheet. So it would be zeroing the normal expense out and moving that expense dollar amount into the line of credit that you're using or the credit card that you're using. So it is something that you do want to, I'll call it, account for in your worksheet, because otherwise you're putting yourself in a position where you're double counting again. So,
right. Okay. I just want to make sure that that question was answered. So Veronica, let us know if that answers your question. We have a super chat from Mike Ray who wants to have his personal situation and some advice. But right before that, I just want to get Veronica's next question out because it pertains to this. Why do a balance transfer if your account is linked to the credit card? Just pay it with your account and bypass the transfer fee.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about the convenience check. So there's no transfer fee in that case. But yes, you're absolutely correct. That's the beauty of linking the linking the credit card to the checking account. It allows you to address those things that you normally would not be able to do. So you're absolutely right. When you go into your online account with both of those credit cards, you would just make a payment for the full amount to pay off those amounts. And then when when that direct debit happens, it ends up hitting that checking account, causing an overdraft charge or overdraft, I'll call it transaction, which then pulls from the credit card. So you're absolutely right.
Okay. And here's Mike's situation. He says he has a HELOC for $20,000. The bank pays $7,000, I think, towards the credit card debt, $3,000 mortgage, income monthly is 5K, 1K in expenses. What's the best way to work the Velocity banking system in my scenario? Now, hold on one second.
I love this picture, by the way.
Yeah, dapper. I want to just remind everybody that they can, if you're watching on TV, because we still have a lot of TV viewers, that you can scan this code so you can text us in questions if you do have some. You can go to our website, selfdirected.info/live, and all of the resources are there too if you have questions. But before you get into answering this, I want to bring up Donnell's consultations are free. They're completely free. And the reason why they're free is because people need help. So we love to be able to know what those factors are for you, so that when you're giving information like Mike did right here, if we were able to unpack your full situation, you might learn that there was actually more important information that was left off. And I think that's kind of the hidden lesson in today's lesson is what didn't she include? What did she think that wasn't important when she was going, hey, how do I apply velocity banking? I'm trying to learn how to do this. This was the same type of question that Mike is coming up here with. Same thing. Like, how do I apply velocity banking? Here are my numbers. But there are some variables that are missing that we don't have access to unless we kind of peel back, or people are willing to share too. Like that's part of it as well. So you can do that. Let me hide the comment for right now. We'll come back to it. You can also get the Velocity Banking workbook that we're talking about if you missed it before by same thing, selfdirected.info/live. You go there and you can access the workbook through the links there. We are looking for ways to constantly support and provide more support and more information on this that people can have access to for free. There's a lot of different interpretations on how to do this. Of course, our style is a little bit different because we don't just focus on debt elimination. We also focus on the long game. This is a long game play here. So while debt elimination is important to be able to free up cash flow, where we're going with this is what are you doing with that cash flow? Sounds like Mike, though, they may be having some questions of what he could do with his cash flow. And so let's get maybe a little bit, peel that back. Is there anything that you can give Mike on this live stream? Obviously, it's better if you call and book a call so you can have a personalized consultation and kind of preview of your figures and what this would look like for you. I think, I don't know, maybe there's between 5 and 8 people a day that Donnell talks to every single day. So that's thousands of people at this point that have had these consultations. And sometimes they call back or they book again for another one, like a follow-up, like, hey, I needed to get some clarification. Sometimes it's like, wow, this really cleared everything up for me. And now I have a game plan. And so if that's you and that's where what you're wanting to do, you can just go to selfdirected.info. Well, you can go to the live too if you want, but selfdirected.info will give you access to the calendar, and that is where you can just choose a time that works for you and jump in. That's it. So let's see what we got for Mike, because while we're on the topic of now you're watching this live stream, you just saw all this information. Now you have some of these strategies maybe you hadn't thought of before, like this actually applies to me, or I never knew you could do that. We're going to talk about breaking down some of those ideas. Maybe you bucked at some and you went like, why would anybody do that? I love that. Please tell me if that's you, because that was me. When he was first doing all these strategies, I was like, who would do that? And why, how does this make sense? Like, the math does not math for me doing it this way. I was wrong. There it is, folks. I have publicly announced it.
Oh, you've done it before, so
Yeah.
nothing to celebrate. You've been wrong before.
Also true. Okay, well, let's help Mike. Let's focus on Mike.
All right. So to your point, sweetheart, I do believe that there may be some information missing, but using the numbers that I have in front of me, income being $5,000, expenses being $1,000, my first question, usually when someone comes to me and they have their numbers and they feel pretty confident about understanding where they currently are, my first question is, then what's your monthly cash flow? Meaning, once your income goes in and you pay expenses, what's left over at the end of the month? Well, using what we have in front of us, if 5,000 is going in and I've got $1,000 worth of expenses, that tells me I've got 4,000 in cash flow. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what my logic tells me. If I've got $4,000 in cash flow, 4 times 12 is 48 grand a year. I've got $48,000 of cash flow available to me.
Yeah.
Who cares about debt? My first question is, where is $48,000 going right now? Maybe it's going to an investment. Maybe it's going to a high yield savings account. Where is $48,000 going? Because if I've got $7,000 in credit card debt, $3,000 mortgage, who cares about that home equity line of credit? I've got $48,000 of cash flow. That credit card debt and that
Three
mortgage is
thousand,
gone.
three
Or-
thousand, three
That's a
thousand
monthly
dollars.
mortgage.
Yeah, the mortgage. Yeah.
So if I had the mortgage plus the expenses, maybe, all right. So mortgage plus expenses, that's 4,000. So I make 5,000. I've got 4,000 expenses. That's $1,000 in cash flow. 1,000 times 12, that's 12 grand a year. I've got $12,000 in cash flow every year.
Well,
Where's it going today?
and of course, we're assuming this because you are limited by characters and what you can put in this box, right?
Yeah, I'm
when
not
you leave a
criticizing. I'm
comment.
saying based on the information that we have.
Yeah, no, what I'm
Based
saying
on
though,
the math. Yeah.
yeah, it's really easy to try to summarize your own situation and be like, oh, this is what I have. Mike may have leverage that he just can't see, and he's right to ask. So, Mike, the best thing that you can do, because we can make a lot of assumptions, is just not enough information here. I don't think personally, but thank you so much for the
But
super
hold
chat and
on.
for jumping in.
Don't leave this yet because
Okay,
we can still get there.
okay, well, let's
He's got
go.
a
Let's go there.
HELOC with 20,000 with a $20,000 limit.
Right,
He's got a mortgage that he's paying 3,000 a month, 1,000 in expenses. That's 4 grand. He
mm-hmm.
brings home five. That's $1,000 a month in cash flow. So, how do you leverage this home equity line of credit? Assuming it's structured properly, assuming it's you can get your income into it and pay expenses from it, assuming that whether you can pay your mortgage or not, but let's just assume that you can pay your expenses from it. It's pretty awesome. You got $5,000 going into that $20,000 line of credit. Let's say it's maxed out. You put $5,000 of your income onto that line of credit. Guess what? That maxed out line of credit is now 15 grand. Once you pay bills, which is $4,000, that's $1,000 of room that has just been created in month one.
Right.
You do that over 5 months, that's $5,000 of room that's been created. Do that over 2 more months, you have now created $7,000 of room on that line of credit. Guess what we're going to do at 7 months?
With the credit card
We're,
debt.
we're
Yeah.
going to pay off that $7,000 credit card. Once you pay off that $7,000 credit card, the balance goes back up. But guess what? The monthly payment that you were paying on that $7,000 credit card, let's call it $70 a month, whatever, 10%. At that, or 1%. At that point, you are then going to include that in your cash flow and then pay it down that much faster. So I think his example, there are so many different ways to go with this, but I call it, I see examples like this as good problems, meaning you've got a debt tool. Now, type of debt tool, we have to dig into those details. Absolutely, you're right, sweetheart. Jump on a call. Let's kind of peel back some of those layers. But I call this good problems. It seems like you have positive cash flow. You've got a debt tool. My question is, what are you doing with this cash flow today? Because to me, based off the picture, seem fairly young. I doubt you want to work for the rest of your life. So how are you putting your money in a position so that you can actually accomplish your goal as quickly as possible? Have you thought
Right.
about retiring early? How can you leverage this line of credit to be able to do other things? Like we can go so far with just that information that's kind of listed there. So, all right,
Yeah.
now you can go, sweetheart.
Okay. Um, Veronica says, no.
She said no.
Well, okay, well, I haven't started her latest comment yet. We were in there talking about transfer fees in the chat.
Yeah.
And there was people sharing, whether or not, like if they paid transfer fees or if they paid based on like overdraft protection fees. I guess there are different ways of structuring this, but can you walk through one more time just in talking about if you're wanting to pay something from a credit card do you need to pay something from the credit card? Because some people think you're not doing velocity banking unless you're paying from the debt tool. But if you're
Yeah.
trying to sleep your expense or whatever this term is, using the multiple dollar same using the same dollar
Analogy.
multiple times. There it is. When you're doing this with a credit card, then can you talk a little bit about the fees and how to structure that?
Yep. And I'll use our personal situation.
Okay.
When we started Velocity Banking, I couldn't qualify for a home equity line of credit. So the only way we could do Velocity Banking was to use, I had a Bank of America, American Express. And at that point, my Bank of America, American Express wasn't even linked to my checking account. So I didn't have it as overdraft protection. So in this situation, every time I'll call it, used my credit card to take care of an expense, I was charged a fee because I was able to link my Amex to my checking account. And every time I overdraft my checking account, I was hit with a $12 charge. And that's $12 for every occurrence. So if I had 10 bills come out that month, that's $12 times every time my checking account was overdrafted. So obviously I had to become a little bit strategic. My point is this. There may be a situation where you're trying to implement velocity banking, and you may run into a situation where if you're going to link a checking account to or link a credit card to a checking account, you may be hit with some charge. My suggestion is do the math on whether or not that makes sense or not. Obviously, taking a a $12 hit every time I have an overdraft isn't realistic. So what did I have to do? I had to strategically align my bills so that I only had one, maybe two every paycheck. I got paid every 2 weeks. So I had to structure things such that when I was going to take get an overdraft charge onto my account, I wanted to make sure it happened as minimum or the minimum amount as possible. And usually that was right around once, if not twice every month, because I would pay bills every paycheck, and I got paid every 2 weeks. So you do have to be strategic. And to me, it's doing the math on whether or not it makes sense. Does it always make sense? I think I can justify when it does, and I can justify when it does not. I think it's specific to the individual. It's specific to what kind of debt it is you're trying to eliminate. But it all boils down to why. Like, what's the point? What's the goal? In our case, the objective was I needed to get my DTI down. I needed to free up cash flow such that we could actually qualify for some better tools. And in order for me to qualify for some better tools, we had to do a few things. One, we borrowed from my self directed 401k a dollar amount to be able to consolidate or pay off some debt. So, one action, again, we had kind of listed out the actions. One of the actions was we applied some leverage to our situation. In addition, we linked a credit card to our checking account, and I was hit with some overdraft charges. I was. I'd do it again. If it was double the amount of cost today, I'd still do it. Why? Because it allowed us to put ourselves in a positive cash flow position, and within 6 months, not only were we able to qualify for another vehicle to get us out of this situation, we were able to put ourselves in a position to where we were able to eliminate our mortgage. There's no way we would have been able to do that had we not taken these opportunities or chances. So the fees that were paid, I think it's being strategic on what they are, how they're coming out, and you might have to adjust some of your behavior so that you're minimizing those fees that are coming. But I wouldn't say be afraid of them. I would say identify, one, what's the goal, and whether or not this is a bridge to help you hit your goal. Because a lot of the conversations I have with individuals who are in a negative cash flow position, who may even be able to link a credit card to a checking account, it still may not make sense to do velocity banking. Why? If you're in negative cash flow, and just because you link a credit card to a checking account, that doesn't eliminate the negative cash flow situation. And if you don't have enough cash flow to offset the cost of the transfer or offset the interest being accumulated in the debt tool, you could be putting yourself in a position to where you are accumulating more interest than you were initially, which means you're making this situation even worse. So maybe debt snowball might make more sense. Maybe we go after the smallest debt first, focus on that, gain more cash flow. And again, maybe it's we turn off something. Maybe it's an opportunity to leverage some line of credit or not line of credit, leverage some type of self-directed retirement account or loan from your current employer. Like there's many different actions you can take here. The key is to kind of sit down and kind of lay it all out on the table and identify which ones make the most sense.
Oh,
Words, words, words.
yeah, lots of words. Okay, we have some more questions here. Veronica says, okay, on the worksheet, how do you show yearly expenses paid? Do you divide it by 12 and then put it in as a monthly thing? That's what
That's
I'd
what I
say.
would. Yeah, that's what I would do. Again, I'm a common sense guy. I don't have a rule book. My common sense tells me if I've got an annual amount, the way I want to identify it in a sheet like this is I want to divide it by 12. Some people, like just tangent, some people only get paid monthly. I get this question all the time. If I only get paid monthly, how do I do velocity banking? If my expenses aren't monthly, okay, I divide it by 12 and I use that average. So I think you're thinking about it the right way.
Yeah. Okay, we have Elizabeth. Elizabeth has brought up an amazing concept where the very end she says, I feel like I might be too old. I feel like it might be too late for me to get started with this. It is never too late. And, whether you are just getting started in thinking about your future for retirement and debt reduction is just a part of that. Or this is, I've got to get rid of this stuff. This is just another strategy to be able to execute. You got to repay this stuff back at some point, right? So maybe debt elimination is your only focus. It's not too late. There's not a clock on using this particular strategy. It's how this strategy fits inside of your bigger machine that age impacts that, because time is the most valuable asset that we have to leverage. And so this would impact the bigger part of your machine, I think. That's
Well, it
it.
says,
Never too
sweetheart,
late, though. That's the point.
but also it's not this or that,
Yeah.
right? It's
Right.
this and that. Meaning, um, how do all of these things align and go together to help you achieve your goals with your much larger machine? So, no, you spot on, sweetheart.
Yeah. So Elizabeth says here that cash flow is 1,300. Parent plus loan is about 13K. Just started using a PLOC to pay it down. 401K is about at 70,000, and that is all I have. Two sons, 21 and 28.
Well, I think the 21 and 28-year-old sons, I think there's an opportunity for everyone getting the same boat and maybe hit some of your goals together, get more aligned, because I see leverage there on being able to leverage your 28 and 21-year-old to help you hit some of your larger objectives, because at the end of the day, it's all going to benefit them as well. But I think in addition to that, how you're using that PLOC is something that jumps out to me, because based off how the sentence reads, parent plus loan of 13,000 just started using a PLOC to pay it down. That sounds like a consolidation action. Is there an opportunity to maybe use that PLOC as an actual debt tool and drive your income through that line of credit, pay bills from that line of credit, and then chunk away at the loan and the other debts that you have, while as your cash flow is living on that personal line of credit, continuing to leverage that line of credit to also help you generate and or build wealth. Because you mentioned the 401k with about 70K in it. I'm I think we're all in agreement that's not enough for you to be able to fire your job at some point. So it's what are the other actions you're putting in place to be able to truly accomplish your goal, which I assume is to not have to work for the rest of your life. So, it's how do you leverage this personal line of credit, pay off the debt, but in addition, leverage it to also help you start generating wealth.
One thing that I don't know that everybody who's watching has heard our story. And when I hear somebody say, like, I feel like it's too late for me, it kind of is in the same bucket as I'm counting myself out of this being an option. Like there's something about this that I don't yet understand, or I'm making an assumption about that it may not be a solution for me. That's the part that's important to me. Like this is the song that I keep singing, is our belief about what's possible for us. So Elizabeth and anybody else who's watching, we were able to build and implement the long lasting impacts of our machine. I don't know if I'm really describing this. Point is, we built this machine and everything that's encompassing for tax-free income for life within 5 or 6 years. I would say that we built all of those components in that amount in 4 or 5 years because we didn't know that they all existed. We had no access to this information all at once. We never saw anybody connect these things together. People were doing this or that, right? They were doing one thing or that. So people were like team HELOC. People were team, this, team that. And we went to go look at all of these different things. And then Donnell was like, what if you connected them together? Because he understood how you could connect them together. And I thought, why weren't more people connecting them together? Just because they counted it out, that it was even an option. No one was looking for how could these connect together? How could we all work together on these different strategies instead of, planting a flag and saying this is the only way to do something. All those other strategies must be wrong. Or people who were listening to these strategies going, well, I don't have access to all of that. So how do I implement or how do I benefit from this? A lot of it, and the point that the drum that I will keep beating on is what we assign as possible for us matters so much more than the information that we're receiving or absorbing. If you have decided that it's too late, then it is too late. If you are, I'm glad you said this though, because sometimes we just need to hear it's not. It is possible for you. It's possible for you to build this. If you are feeling like, it's too late to get started on a retirement plan, let's have the conversation. Let's find out the answer is no. Let's find out. Let's not assume that the answer is no, because we've seen some amazing things happen just because people don't understand what their leverage is, where it is, how to use it, how to overutilize something that's being collecting dust, right? I just wish that I could help others to understand the bigger picture, the long game that we're playing here. When you say what's the goal, for some people it's just debt elimination. That's it. For someone like Elizabeth though, she said it at the very end. The goal is in regards to 2 sons, 21 and 28. Even though she's thinking about her debt, even though she's thinking of her financial profile, these two are attached to that, right?
That's right.
It's part of her goal. And so we have to be able to unpack this and then understand it's okay to hope. It's okay to believe. It is people with these crazy amounts of belief who went out there and found solutions when nobody else had those solutions. They said, well, this isn't enough. People aren't able to retire. 78% of Americans have no retirement plan, no financial security, and no plan. What are they going to do? What will they do if they don't get a crazy idea that, even though the government and everybody else is telling me it's not possible for me, what if I just didn't stop looking for solutions? I just might find one, right? And I think that's at the root of our story, is that we just didn't give up. We just kept going and kept asking questions. And even though we were rubbing some people the wrong way, like, what do you mean? Why are you asking me these questions? If it could be done, don't you think I would know that it could be done? Okay, well then tell me. Tell me how it could be done. And a lot of those people just did not want to. Why? They didn't benefit from learning how you could connect it with another gear or machine, right? So that's not us though. We just do things in a different way. That's why the strategies that we teach are a little bit different as well. We have some more questions, so I want to get to that. But the sentiment here is, what are your options for increasing your cash flow? Because that's a powerful point of leverage, right? But there are so many other pieces here. It's not this or that, it's this and that. We talk about that all the time. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And so that's why we ask the question, what is the goal? The end goal is what you're doing taking months or years out of you being able to achieve your goal. Could you also achieve this temporary goal, this short goal of reducing debt, which for some people they think is a forever goal, right? Could you do this and also create financial security? The answer is yes. Absolutely, and we will help you find a way to do it, and exhaust all options, being to do that research with you, just because it matters so much to keep asking questions. So if you have a question about it, put it in the chat. Book a call with Donnell so that you can pick his brain and say, hey, what options would be for me? Here's the pieces that I'm working with. Geez, get it out, Angelique. She said, could I get a life insurance on one of my sons to use it for family finances with his permission, of course, or is that illegal?
So how about this?
Elizabeth, I love that.
Let's address the part with his permission. Well, you got a 28 and a 21-year-old. That 21-year-old, you have insurable interest over, which means you can do this and you can own the policy as well. Which means, obviously with his permission, but again, he's 21 years old. You have the ability to not only get a policy on your 21-year-old, you have the ability to own that policy, leverage it, use it for whatever you want, pay bills, debt consolidation, leverage to be able to build wealth, whatever you would like. Now, the 28-year-old, you can have a policy on him as well, but you can't necessarily own it. He would own the policy. It would just kind of be an understanding on agreement between the two of you. But here's where I usually kind of steer the ship. In truth, what's missing in this equation is a trust. Because in truth, what you should have is a trust that owns policies not just on your sons, but on you and your sons. And God forbid, if something were to happen, that death benefit rolls back into that trust. But the trust is where all of your assets would live, to include your life insurance-based products. And then as income starts to grow inside those vehicles, it's that trust that will then distribute income throughout the, I'll call it the legacy for the next 3, 4, 500 years as to what income looks like. That would be the role that trust would play. But where do you start? You start with freeing up the cash flow so that you can put that money to work and leveraging the assets that you have, to include your sons with your insurable interest, to put that money in a vehicle that can start generating wealth for you.
Vehicle is the key word, because she says life insurance, but it's not just life insurance. And
Right,
that's,
not well put. Well put.
yeah,
Go,
I
keep
just
going. I'm
wanted to
sorry, I
say
cut
that
you off.
there are a lot of people out here who are using the term and who would say, yes, absolutely use life insurance. But let's unpack that, because not all of them are vehicles that will get you to the goal. They'll get you somewhere. They'll take you somewhere. But again, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And you're just waiting to find out, where did we end up? Where did we end up at the end of the day? It's like a surprise, right? We're not talking about surprise boxes over here. We want to know where we're going and what exit we're getting off, when we're getting off. We want to know all of those things, and then what impacts that goal. If you don't know those things, for instance, infinite banking, a lot of people will say all of these benefits about infinite banking, but they won't tell you the ones that impact what your policy looks like, or what it will look like 10, 20, 30 years down the road. If you knew that information, you may not have gotten into it in the first place. The problem with that is, by the time you get on the phone with Donnell, there may be some losses that you can't recoup. So that's why I think it's probably best to go and start educating yourself on these particular products. And don't be shy. Don't be afraid to push back on people. Don't be afraid to book a call with somebody else. Don't be afraid to, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say, but there's been quite a few times when you have been asked to come on the phone with somebody else who has been advising a particular person, and say, okay, Donnell, can you explain to him what you told me, or to her what you told me? And you end up on the call with this other person who was saying that you were wrong, until now you're on the call and they're going, well, I'll be damned, I didn't know that was an option, right?
It happens a lot, whether it's financial advisors or life insurance providers. I end up on a call with a lot of, I'll call it clients of mine, who bring their well-trusted financial person with them. And the issue is, most financial advisors are captured by the company that they work for. So they
What does
can
that
only
mean?
offer, yep, I'm getting there. So they can only offer what their company allows them to offer. So a specific example, let's say you have a financial advisor with Fidelity. The most that financial advisor with Fidelity can offer you is what Fidelity offers.
Yeah.
They can't go outside of Fidelity, and it would be illegal for them to do so. They would lose their license. You might have a life insurance provider who works for a specific life insurance company. So the best that they can do is offer you products that that specific life insurance company offers. What you need for your particular situation may be something that is outside of the scope of what it is they offer. But how would you ever know if you don't peel back the layers and ask some of those questions and understand what's available? And I think that's where, we spent these last few weeks talking about velocity banking, and we always end with, hey, here's this vehicle that you can take that cash flow, put it in, and actually be able to generate wealth. I think one of the next stages of this, as we kind of transition to what we are going to talk through next, is kind of identifying, peeling back the layers on what some of those vehicles are and why they might not be what you think they are, depending on where you get that vehicle from. Meaning, a life insurance policy is not a life insurance policy is not a life insurance policy. You have to be specific on what's the goal and what is the capability of this product. Is it term? Is it permanent? Is it a whole life? Is it an IUL? Does it have leverage? Does it not? What are the fees? Who benefits? Like, there's so many things to kind of talk through there.
And a lot of the times, what you're doing is you're walking people through some of the information and some of the conversation that most agents cannot have with them. One of the reasons why is they're not trained to have these conversations, like their break-even date and how impactful and important the break-even date is. And people say, well, what is the break-even date? If you're asking what is the break-even date, then it means you don't know or you haven't been educated. You will be educated if you had that conversation with Donnell. And the reason why is because it impacts the growth of that policy. Just listening to the people that you had talked to just over this last week. And when somebody goes, and instead of it being and this is your break even date, and this is why it's important, she got there before you got there. I really appreciate your teaching style. I think that's what most people appreciate is the environment and how comfortable it feels to learn with you. That's a gift in itself. But I think that's the whole reason why we're out here doing this is just because we don't have to. It's a privilege, actually, that we don't have to. But the reason why we don't have to be out here doing stuff like this or actively working if we didn't want to is because this machine that we built works. It works. It's not dependent on other people buying the machine. We have no machine to sell. We don't have a machine to sell you. You have to build your own machine. All we're out here doing is shouting from the rooftops that this is possible for people. Because if you don't know why this is so important to learn, it's going to scare the mess out of you by the time you realize what's coming. Now, if you missed our inflation live stream, that's a couple weeks ago. And just look for that thumbnail. That's in our live stream lineup. But those types of things, if that doesn't scare you and you're not looking for how can I get serious about my finances, how can I get serious about helping my kids, if you have kids who are going to come up and face their reality and what this economy is going to look like in 20, 30 years, you need to know. You definitely need to know. Okay, Crafts Bayou is up next. She says, if we are paying off zero interest credit cards, but have an unused HELOC sitting there available, can we leverage that along with the cash flow to make the most of a SKIA?
All day long. And again, it goes back to the goal. But absolutely, you can leverage that home equity line of credit to be able to, I'll call it, supercharge any contribution that you would make inside of a SKIA. SKIA meaning secure compound interest account. Go ahead, sweetheart.
She said she's paying off zero interest credit cards. So I'm assuming it's only zero interest for some sort of term, right? And you have an unused HELOC sitting there. So that it isn't zero interest, right? How you strategize or leverage this opportunity might matter. For instance, it would be interesting to know, we're calling her Crafts now. Crafts, if you have 12 more months on the zero interest, right? Why throw that on the credit card if you can leave it there for 12 more months? Why not use the HELOC to then, why not look at your opportunity a little bit differently to see how one machine can start feeding the other? And if you do this in the right order, then we leveraged these same type of vehicles in the beginning so that we could super fund front fund compound interest accounts so they could start growing and compounding faster, right? If they are 0%, some of these were hard money loans that went out to other people because we don't want to flip houses. Other people want to. We love that for them. But we also just get a return for doing none of the work, right? So if we were able to do that and we borrowed the money at 0% and we got 15, 18% back on those deals, I thought, how are people not taking advantage of this and doing this? And the truth was, like us, they did not know that it was possible to do. So understanding your leverage is important. Go ahead.
No, I don't have anything to add to that. I think you're spot on with every piece of that equation that you kind of laid out, and that is understanding where your leverage is and putting it in a position to where it can actually generate wealth for you. So I don't need to restate that. I think you're spot on.
Well, thank you. She also says, I think we are working so hard to rethink our thinking that we were burnt out and couldn't remember what we could still do. All of a sudden, it was like, let's just pay off the debt, but that's not it. Right. And that does seem like the easiest thing because it's the program that keeps going out there. No different than let's just follow along with every calendar holiday that they put on the calendar, and we got to go out and we buy decorations, or we have to go out and we have to buy gifts, or we have to go out and do this because it's become a tradition. It is now a tradition to just be in insane amounts of debt and not have any financial security. Like, that's become a tradition because who benefits if we were to make different decisions through the year, right? If we are doing things so that we benefit, then the stores, we'll just call them the stores, they would not benefit, right? Those behind pushing the fact that we always need stuff and things like new countertops. Are your countertops broken and not usable anymore? Well, here, we can give you new countertops. That's not what we do. We say, this is ugly. Not that it doesn't work. We will go into debt because something doesn't look right. And so therefore, we will put ourselves in a position where we do not have any financial security, or we are tapped out, or we are making the struggle even harder for ourselves because it's a standard, it's a tradition, it's a standard now to have things a certain way, including the lack of financial security, right? Some guy came over and he gave us a quote on windows. If you were here, if you've been here for a while, you already heard this story. It was $109,000.
Yeah, I put that far out of my memory, but yeah,
well,
somewhere
let's
around
bring
there.
it on back because it's a good one. $109,000 was what they quoted us, and this was if we would be a marketing home in the neighborhood, right? If we would put the sign out in front, then that was a special rate that they were going to give us for these windows. And I about kicked this man out my house. Are you kidding me? Do you know what $109,000 is going to sit in these windows in my home? Do you know what $109,000 could be doing if it was making its own money? That $109,000 is going to die in those windows and there's holes in the walls. Are you kidding me right now? $109,000 is going to save us money on electric bill. Show me where we're going to pay $109,000 in the next 10 years. I don't think he probably should have just put a PSA out to all the window people not to come to our house, because he's also said that every 10 years you need to replace your windows.
He did.
So $109,000, that's over $10,000 a year that we're supposed to be saving. Show me where I'm saving over $10,000 a year in electricity bills, because we're not. We have solar. And the reason why we got solar is because we pay less now for the solar. What we pay, when you average it out, what we pay for the solar and what we pay for electricity all through the year was even less than the smallest bill that we had from the electric company. And that's really what I wanted to get into, is talking about if you have negative cash flow, there's probably other opportunities for you to mop up. And if you're a fan of soaking up the gravy with the biscuit, if you like all the bits and you don't like to leave any left on your plate, then this is probably for you. These are just questions that you can ask yourself and calls that you can make things a little bit easier. Some of those are, I didn't even know you could do that. For instance, getting the solar to reduce the bill. Our bills used to be $600 a month because we're in Arizona. So it gets 120 out here. It's just hot. It's hot everywhere. $700 is not a vibe to have to pay for electricity, but everybody's doing it. Because of that, they can charge whatever they want, and the electricity rate's just going to continue to rise. A lot of the solar companies came, they had these astronomical amounts for these solar panels that they were going to put up here, but they could not help us do the math. Donnell did the math, and when he came back to the person, he pretty much sold him and the other guy. And he said, wow, I never seen the math done that way. He had broke down the cost for electricity, the cost for the solar, and he understood how to break all that down. And it turns out that we're actually saving money, and they're buying it back from us. Like the power that we don't use or whatever, the solar company ends up buying it back from us. Our rate can't, even if our rate increases, the amount that we're buying from them is so small, it wouldn't matter. It's insignificant. These types of things matter greatly, because when we were having this conversation in the beginning, my mind, where I was with my thinking, was, where the heck does this $20,000 is justified? Darlin, I love it for you that you had the conversation with the solar guy, but I'm not, like, pause. Why are we spending money on solar? I don't want to do this. This doesn't make sense. We could put this and allocate it somewhere else, maybe, probably, right? Like, it doesn't make sense. Once he broke the math down, the long term, you really got to look at this long term. Now, this doesn't work if you're not going to stay in your home. We plan to stay here. So this made absolute sense for us. Not only has it reduced the bill, it's opened up other opportunities for us. What are some other ways that you've, the phone calls to reduce the just regular bills, right? Like cable. What are some other ones that you did?
Well, again, because we talk a lot about from our perspective, our story, the way we were able to put ourselves in a position to where we could replace our mortgage with a first position home equity line of credit. We didn't just wake up one morning and go, you know what, I'm going to do this. There was a lot of work involved around improving our credit worthiness and putting ourselves in a position to where a bank would look at us positively versus negatively. And it all started with little things like, where is the cash flow today and how can we improve it? Is there an opportunity to, because I do this all, these are things that I still do today, like calling direct TV and just ask, what are the promotions? Why? Because my objective is to threaten them with canceling so they could give me $20, $30 a month off for the next 6 to 8 months, which does what? Increases my cat. Like, I literally did this last week. So I still do it today. And it's not because it needs to be done, it's because it mathematically makes sense. But imagine if so it's really little things that when you add them up, they make a significant difference. You know, when you were talking, one of the things that reminded me was when we were doing velocity banking and putting ourselves in a much more positive cash flow position, we asked the question of ourselves, now what? Well,
Yeah.
now what became infinite banking? And just so we're clear, um, the life insurance products that we offer are secure compound interest accounts in the form of a premium finance strategy. It's an IUL with leverage. But when we were headed down this journey, that type of product existed. We weren't aware of it, didn't know how to have access to it. So we only knew infinite banking. We only knew whole life based products. And I remember sitting in front of Ray Poteet. You guys should Google who Ray Poteet is. I remember sitting in front of Ray Poteet and him educating me on infinite banking. And I said, you know what? We currently do velocity banking, and he didn't understand what it was. And my comment to him was, I don't know much about infinite banking, but I am confident infinite banking and velocity banking talk. And I am confident that if you apply the strategy to both, you can be successful. He nodded and he said, you know, it was almost one of those, you know, patting me on my head going, yeah, I see you have ideas, but those ideas don't work over here because there is a focus and a strategy around infinite banking that doesn't apply to what it is you're referencing.
Yeah. Don't confuse things. Don't make it
Right.
more confusing than it needs to be.
Right, right. Son, you know nothing of what it is you're talking about. Fast forward to today, how many infinite banking social media people are combining velocity banking and infinite banking? The point is, there are absolutely these strategies out here that, you know what, if you just keep chugging along. No, doesn't matter how small it is. You may be making some small incidental improvement in your cash flow, but it builds. It's a machine that you're building, and as you add these strategies together, they actually can put you in a position to where you can bypass all of this stuff. Because fast forward to today, even though I'm still using those same small strategies, those strategies have a strong impact on how we're able to sustain our machine.
Yeah.
So it all matters.
Well, the other thing was that you had called the credit card companies and you say, okay, what do you guys want to do? You want to give me $50,000? And they said, okay, is that what you want? 50,000? And you said, yeah, sure, 50,000. And then they just said, okay, we're going to give you $50,000. And you went, wow, that was easy. So you went and called them all around. What did that do? That instantly increased your line of credit. So now you have an additional 25,000 on this one, 50,000 on that one. So whatever you were utilizing in there, your credit utilization just completely shifted because the line of the limit was raised, right? And we didn't even know that you could just call up and ask them. Like, why would anybody assume that you could do these things? But this is why there are people out here who are winning. And you think that they're playing the same game as you. You think that they have the same variables as you, but they don't, because they have one thing that you may not have, which is just information, right? What is possible out there? Every time you come around the corner and you'd be like, oh, well, we just added another 25,000 to Bank of America or whatever it was. And I'm like, why is this a good thing? Like I was still struggling to understand velocity banking. I was trying to understand how using more credit was a good thing, because I believe it was hard for me to let go of these beliefs, right? I was so programmed to believe that credit cards were bad, debt was bad. If you can't pay cash, just don't pay for it. And I was clawing to hold on with all my might to these belief systems, because I felt like this is the safest way. This is safe. If you don't do this, if you don't hold on to what's safe and what's been said to be safe, what just makes sense, right? Makes sense, then you're putting yourself in a position to clean up a mess that you ended up making. And I don't want that kind of judgment for myself, right? I'm going to be safe so I can pat myself on the back and say, you did good. You did so good. The truth is that all of that's a lie. And I think it came from a time period where that may have made more sense, right? Just based off of where we are. Yep. But also just times, like time periods matter. Like the approach to retirement planning in the 70s and in the 80s is completely different past 2000. Like we can just agree to that. But a lot of this old advice, a lot of these mantras around personal finance came from people who were back in the 1970s. If you've been here, you know that those are the same people who thought meat and jello going together made a fancy meal, and they put it in molds and they put it in magazines because this was amazing. So was their financial advice that we keep touting over and over through the decades. That's a hill I'm going to die on. Okay, how do we outrun the HELOC's 11%? I think that's where you were going with this. But having this be a part of the strategy and seeing how the math, because if you're looking at 11% in HELOC, which is kind of crazy that we're all the way up to 11% for an average, I thought you were capping, but then I went and looked. So if you're looking at going, how do I leverage a HELOC? Look at these interest rates. It is insane. Please see some of our debt reduction, our velocity banking, where we have used HELOCs with these higher interest rates. And when you see the math all the way through, you understand that there's actually a win to be had, but the math is important to do all the way through.
Yeah, we did this exact example. Was it today is Sunday, so Wednesday? The example that we did was using 11.84% I think it was a personal line of credit for 11.84% to pay down debt. How do you outrun 11%? I don't think you do. I think you leverage 11%. And here's the key about a home equity line of credit. That's 11% simple interest.
Mm-hmm.
I've done this many times on this channel. I can show you how an 11% home equity line of credit will will allow you to save more interest than a 3% mortgage all day, every day. The key is leveraging that line of credit as a tool. If you're using the line of credit to just simply pay bills, and then you're paying the minimum, you'll never make any headway. But just imagine all of your income going into that line of credit, regardless of what your income is. All of your income going into that line of credit. When it does, it brings that balance of that line of credit down to the lowest point it will ever see for that month. And then as interest is calculated on that lowest amount, then yeah, you got to pay bills from that. But assuming you have cash flow, again, assuming you have cash flow, it's that cash flow that continues to make room, make space, give you flexibility to be able to leverage that line of credit over and over and over again. That ability compared to what you were doing in your mortgage, you don't have that same capability. If you put all of your income into your mortgage, that dollar amount is gone. You have no ability to be able to leverage that dollar amount without having to qualify it through a bank or through some process, but it's not accessible to you by debit card. Whereas if you drive your expenses through the line of credit, it allows you to pay off those expenses faster, to include paying off your mortgage if that's something you chose to do. But the moral of the story is I wouldn't outrun the 11%. I would embrace the 11% and leverage that 11% to address all of your other debts.
Yeah, and I think having a plan matters so much. People are in here roasting me about how I treated that window person, and it's not necessarily how I treated the window person, because I really wasn't yelling at him, right? I wasn't really kicking. I wasn't. It wasn't at him directly. It was more of at what he represented, right? What I was rude.
No, I wouldn't say that. Like, I think the response he got was the response he deserves, because there was no logic that he could provide where that maths. And I think, but the piece that I remember from that discussion is your statement of, "Did our windows stop windowing?" I
I
thought
said
that
the
was
windows are still
like the windows
windowing.
are
We do
still
not need to
windowing. Like,
replace them.
why do we need to spend?
They are. The floors are still flooring. We don't need to
The
have somebody
windows
come in
are
here.
still windowing.
They're still working, and I don't know. These windows are from what was our house built in
92 or something
1992?
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are the original windows. And it's easy for a window person to come in and be like, gasp. Oh, you need to replace all of these
Look at that
windows.
condensation.
Yeah, look at this over here. And to tell us that it's only going to be $109,000, and phew, we're going to be so relieved that we have these new windows now for soundproofing, for something, to solve another problem. But just because they're 10 years old, like, tell me that there's a health risk to these windows being old. Like, once the glass gets 10 years old, it starts producing something that causes cancer. Like, who knows? That's probably a thing. We'll put a pin in that for now. But tell me where we're going if it's all disposable, right? All of it's disposable. The house that we're in right now, all of us, we're in right now, in 50 years, these will be ancient homes that have to be torn down and rebuilt on the land because, gosh, these windows, these floors, these everything are just completely way too old. It's disposable. We had that conversation on the inflation live stream for sure, just in terms of like where we were going. But we have to be thinking about what we're prioritizing right now. It's not a lot of people put money and they say it's worth the investment into the home to upgrade and to do things, right? But if you're doing those things and you don't have a machine that is going to make that money back for you, that's where the problem lies. But it's highly justified by everybody here in the commerce department of what you need to do and what the standards are and what the tradition is, right? Like, to this guy, he really believed that it was okay to go out here and be selling these windows for $110,000 for 10 years.
That was the discounted price. That was the discounted price.
That was like half off. Yeah, that was half off. And I thought to myself, do you know how many rental homes we could buy if we had $100,000 we were going to put somewhere? We were not going to put it in windows. Like, we're just not going to do that. It does not make sense. But for this guy, I was more angry at the fact that he believed this. And I know he was just trying to make an income. I understand that part, and I can't fault him for that part. But we have to do better. We have to do better for each other too, not to be out here selling stuff that don't make sense. There are solutions. There are absolute problems that need to be solved, but that isn't one of them.
Right.
It's not one of them. People have way bigger problems, and I feel like if we found more actual problems to solve, the world would be a better place. And we wouldn't be having to sell $110,000 worth of windows for windows that aren't broken in the first place or aren't going to reduce the bill any more. There's no reason to replace them if it's not going to be some significant and you're going to be able to get your money back in some way or other. Like the comfort level, whatever it is, but that was not the case. We just see things different now and thank God I see things different now. I have 3 degrees in architecture and architecture and interior design. And for me to tell you that I have not updated these countertops, right? For me to tell you that there are things here about this house that 5, 6, 10 years ago, that version of me would have not been okay, unacceptable. There is a fix. We have to fix this because I can't just look at it every day. I had all the justifications, right? Plus I had invested money into having these justifications, right? So for me to get to where I am with aesthetics, with how your home looks, to where you would allocate money and why, it was hard to let go of, very hard to let go of. But I can't unsee what $20,000 would do if I put it on my countertops. It would go there and it would die. I can't do that. $20,000 would make so much more sitting in our secure compound interest account. Sitting in this part of our machine over here would be reducing debt at this rate, right? Sitting over here would be doing something completely different. If I put this on my floors, I got to look at it every day and know that it's not making any more money. It's not. So now we just look at things differently. And I thank God for this perspective, because if we didn't, I think our lives would look a lot different. We would not be able to stop working. We would still be working, and we would not be able to be out here helping people in this way, because we would not have known to continue looking for solutions. I hope you learn, like, that's the one thing you take away from this, is to continue looking for solutions and to push for yourself. Push for your future. Push for your finances to last more than just your generation, right? For your finances to spill over into the next generation. Like, how do we build this so that it becomes a win on win on win? It's possible. We know that it's possible because we built it, and we know it should not take until you are 59 and a half or 70 years old, or a typical 40 years to be able to build this machine. These old traditional ways are gone. They don't apply anymore. We needed new solutions a long time ago. Now we have them. We just have to be able to understand them. We have to be able to learn them. We have to be able to implement them. And then we have to each one teach one and go grab somebody else so that they can come with us. That's what we got to do. Okay. Do you want to show them what do you do from here?
We can, or we can give away a boat.
Okay, well, how about this? We wanted to move into the question of, what do you do from here? You had negative cash flow, or you didn't have negative cash flow. You started implementing velocity banking. What are some of the things that you can add to this to supercharge velocity banking? What are some of the things that you could maybe miss that would impact your results for velocity banking? That's what we're going to talk about on Wednesday. So if you haven't subscribed, do that and hit the notification bell so you get the notification for that. If you have any questions, though, you want us to cover before we end out our series on velocity banking and move to something else, put them in the chat, put them in the comments, and then we'll be sure to bring them up on Wednesday. I'm saying all this because Elizabeth was asking, what is the difference between an IUL and a whole life policy? Like how do I know that, what differences to look for? Why should I know that there's a difference? And we've covered this plenty on our channel. So information already exists if you want to go ahead and look at that. And I'll try to put in the description for those who are watching the replay. But we are going into almost like a beginner series of that and more, especially about a secure compound interest account and how to leverage them. So that is what we will be moving into next Wednesday, because we won't be here for Father's Day, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. I am with giving away a boat. I think that that's a great, we always love to, let me put it up here. If you are in the chat and you're watching and if you're not in the chat and you're just watching, now is your time to get in the chat and put hashtag boat in the chat. Don't do it. Don't do it. You do this. Remember, we agreed. You're not going to do it. He's not going to put hashtag boat in the chat this time because it always ends up picking him. And then we just have to spin again. Okay, so no, you're not going to do it. Don't do it. We're going to remind everybody why we give away this boat. This has been said to be a one-sentence solution. We were talking about it before. Get people in the boat with you. Who's in your boat? And what you're doing inside of your boat really matters. If you've been here before, then you know that this is a powerful concept. This question that was asked, and it's all based on a book. This story is incredibly inspiring, and that is why it has been at the root and the center of our community and many communities around. This question, will it make the boat go faster? The decisions that we make every single day matter so much, and that is what the type of community that we are building is, to be supportive. So jump in here, jump in the chat, put hashtag boat in the chat so that you can win a boat and have this visual reminder of this very powerful concept. In 1998, a British rowing team dreaming of the Olympic gold found themselves ranked 7th. Their focus had always been on the competition day, but they realized the keys to reaching their highest potential were hiding in the decisions that they'd make over those next 2 years.
Faced with two obvious choices, continue their current path and expect the same result, or give up, they discovered a third transformative option. They united under one guiding question: will it make the boat go faster? Every decision, every action was weighed against this mantra. If the answer was yes, they could or would have to do it.
If the answer was no, it was forbidden, non-negotiable. Prior to the competition, this team was doubted and ridiculed, but no one knew what they had been doing. And once they hit the water, they were nearly unrecognizable, achieved their pinnacle, and won the gold. So we ask you,
What is your goal? What are you willing to do to achieve it?
will your story feel unrecognizable, even to you? Are you willing to light your beacon and stay focused, stay committed? Is your story non-negotiable, or are you waiting to find out how you ranked? Your financial future is not a game. You are only competing with yourself and those in the boat with you, your family, and the many generations to come.
Will this make the boat go faster? A sounding alarm, a beacon of clarity amidst turbulent life decisions.
It's not just about speed, but direction, purpose, and an unwavering commitment. Every choice, every sacrifice aimed at the goal.
The first agreement this team made was to become fully self-directed, making their health their wealth, adopting a new perspective on their time and freedom, and the decisions they could fully control to reach their goal.
Will we make your boat go faster? That is our pledge to you. Our mission is to arm you with knowledge, strategies, and insights to ensure that not only you reach the goal, but you do so long before your race is over. Okay, if you put hashtag boat in the chat, then you should be popping up here. Let's spin and see who's gonna win. Who's it gonna be? We got some new names in here. That's exciting. Hey, Brenda! It's like Brenda's special day. I think she won a boat last time too.
She did.
Yeah, but we don't mind. We kind of upset the post office, so we got this phone call that was like, "Hey, look, I don't know why you guys are sending out so many of these things, but you're gonna have to package them differently." Hey, congrats! I don't know if this is if you're new to turning in here, but that's even more exciting. Congrats on winning the boat. And if you did get a boat, you're gonna go here to claim it and tell us where to send it so that we'll know. Just go scroll down the page and you'll see, did you win a boat? All right, let's spin again.
And to that point, last one, I think 3 is about our limit.
Yeah, we can't send too many because they have to hand sort them, and they got super mad at us for sending too many.
Break the
Hey,
bank.
Janice.
Congratulations to all the winners.
Yes, congratulations. So go to selfdirected.info/live. If you didn't win a boat, come back and get one. We are actually changing this up because thanks to the post office, we decided we're going to switch up what it is that we do here and what we're giving away and what the benefit is, the bonus for learning and how to share this out with other people. We have something coming and I'm so excited to share it with you guys. So tune in, make sure you subscribe, and you come back to be able to win a boat. All right, we got it. We can't just stop the song because it's a vibe, right? I just want to say that time is the most valuable asset that we have, and we are so grateful that you're spending your time here with us. I think we're good, yeah?
Let's take it home.
Okay, well, we like to end with, if you didn't come from a wealthy family,
You can make sure a wealthy family comes from you.
so stay tuned,
Stay protected.
stay focused.
Stay connected.
My name's Angelique,
And I'm Donnell.
and our goal is to help you.
Get self-directed.
And to do that, we have a ton of free resources. Trying to find we have a ton of free resources, and so don't sleep on those. Not only do we have the Velocity Banking workbook, we have 2 free books. One of them is around the lost science of compound interest that explains why compound interest is so key in growing wealth, sustainable wealth, but more importantly, income that you won't run out of, okay? The other one is Why Everyone Ends Up Poor. That's another free book. That is a really great read. It kind of breaks down what has happened over the last few decades and why so many people are returning to work, running out of money, and what was flawed in the retirement planning industry. And so, and what we have now available to fix it. So there's that. What do we have? We have more videos. We have a comprehensive video series that answers a lot of frequently asked questions, and we're always adding more stuff. So there's case studies back there, and then of course we have our YouTube channel, which has a whole year. We've gone live twice a week for the last year, and you have all of those resources too. You can always book a call with us, and we're going to tell you how to do that in just a second. We really appreciate all the time that you guys spend with us, that you come back here every week, that you jump in the chat, you've jumped in our Facebook group, you've helped us form a community. And because of that, you guys are out there teaching other people how to do this stuff and transform their lives. And my heart is entirely full hearing these stories. Keep doing it and come back here and see us. We'll be back here on Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Hey, before you go, we want to remind you that becoming fully self-directed means gaining complete control over your wealth, time, and freedom. It's not just an idea. It's a framework, a mindset, and the power to make informed decisions to secure your future. Being here means you're taking those steps, and we want to thank you for allowing us to guide you. We believe that we grow farther and faster when we grow together. So tune in next time and tell a friend to tell a friend. We've helped thousands of people just like you start their journey to financial freedom. And if they can do it, you can too. And if you're ready to learn more, we got you. Get a head start by grabbing these 2 free books. But how do they get them, Donnell?
Head over to my website where you'll have access to a few things. A ton of free resources, case studies, and over 100 5-star reviews from people just like you. And in 15 minutes, we can explore what's possible for you. So don't wait.
Invest in what you want, when you want.
But first, let us help you
Get self-directed.